Welcome to Showing Up Anyway, the podcast for people who are not perfect. On this show, we talk about intuitive eating, fitness without obsession, and healing your relationship with food and your body. Hi, everyone. Today's episode is called Starting Imperfectly. My goodness, I am so happy you are here. We're finally doing this. I have been asked a lot to do a podcast, and if I'm being honest, starting over on a new platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts has been super intimidating. And so I have been procrastinating like hell. And I've been trying to get everything else in order before actually recording the content. And then I realized, you know what? That's probably an important thing. I should do that. So here we are. You're listening to the very first episode of Showing Up Anyway. If you're here, you probably know who I am. I have almost 2 million followers across my socials, but I am so happy to start something new and exciting, and long form content is something I really haven't done a whole lot of before. Now, I'll be honest, I am nervous about starting this podcast. It's not because I'm not confident in the way that I teach and my approach to fitness and health and the content that I talk about. It's really because I don't usually speak off the cuff like this. You know, my content is oftentimes scripted. It is heavily curated to make sure that I'm not flubbing my words and that I say the right thing. I'm going to try and be a little more unedited and real with you guys so you can feel my personality and get to know me as a person and how I feel about things and my real honest approach to fitness and the way that I coach, because the way that I talk is the way that I coach. That's just me. So let's start with a little introduction. My name is Adam. I'm 38 almost, and I have been training for almost 10 years. I've been a personal trainer. My journey started back in 2015. Well, let's go even further back, I suppose. I grew up suffering the harmful effects of diet culture. I was overweight most of my life. I remember being bullied as a kid. I suffered an eating disorder in high school. And I remember it starting, interestingly enough, in a weight training class when I had lost a lot of weight because I started exercising. That was really my first introduction to exercise. And I'd lost a lot of weight and I was getting compliments and everyone was telling me how good I looked. And that was exciting for me. And then after that class ended and it was on summer break, I was craving those compliments and I wasn't exercising anymore. And so I really did the only thing I knew to do. And that was purging. And unfortunately, that took over my life for quite a while. Thankfully, I had really supportive parents. Not everyone's so lucky. They helped me get help, and that's now behind me. But the harmful effects of that kind of lingered. And my relationship with food and my body has been a real challenge for me. And so after high school, when I was 19, I joined the Army and I was a medic in the military for 3 years. I did a tour in Iraq. So during basic training, I had lost a bunch of weight again, more of that yo-yo cycle, right? And I'd lost a bunch of weight because, again, I've been just exercising nonstop and our food was very limited and rationed very strictly. And so after the military, when I got out and I didn't have to exercise every single day and I could eat whatever I wanted to, I sort of rebelled and I was like, I'm going to eat everything I can and I'm not going to exercise at all. I'm sick of it. And I gained a bunch of weight, obviously, to the point where when I was about 25, I saw a picture of myself and I realized that I was not happy in the body that I was in. And it's not really because I was fat. I don't think. I'll admit back then that's something. I mean, I was, 25. That seemed like everything. I wanted to look hot. But looking back now, I realized that I just wasn't happy with who I was. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. I did know about exercise, so I was doing a bunch of that, and I was just trying to eat less. I didn't have the best habits, but I don't think I was doing anything incredibly dangerous, thankfully. But I did lose some weight, and then on a whim, I started working. I was going to college. I started working at a gym, and the gym I started working at had a pretty cool culture. I really liked the personal trainers that were there. I was there in the early morning and got to talk to them and got to see their clients' faces light up when they came in the room or walked in the gym. And I was like, man, you guys have a really cool job. And I started talking to the general manager of the gym. And I was like, I think I'd be really good at that. I'd just undergone a weight loss transformation myself. I'd always loved helping people. I was a medic in the military, so like that was something that was pretty natural for me. And they were like, you know what? We believe in you. Why don't we get you sponsored? We'll pay for your certification. And I said, yeah, let's do it, man. So they paid for my certification. I began training. I loved what I was doing, loved working with people, loved getting to know them, hearing their stories. And it was really great for me because it let me work with people of all different shapes and sizes. I worked with old women who had their hips replaced. I worked with amputees. I worked with millennial women. Like I worked with everybody. And it really helped me become versatile and understand that everybody had a different story. And I think that really helped me because I learned a sense of empathy that I don't think that I really would have understood if I hadn't done that. I quickly moved up the ranks. I became a master trainer. Which just means that you have done a certain amount of coaching, right? You coach a number of hours, whatever. I think it was like 2,000 at the time. And 2,000 hours of training. I've worked with, dozens and dozens and dozens of clients. And then I became a fitness manager. And I worked so hard to become a fitness manager. And after just a brief time, I realized I absolutely hated that. And it was because I no longer was training. I had to give up every single client that I had, except for one. And I got to keep one, thankfully. But I had to go in and do administrative stuff. And it just wasn't what I wanted to do. It was about the numbers. It wasn't about the people. And so I left that job. And I said, I just can't do this anymore. This is not what I became a personal trainer for. And I started my own business. And for a while, I was working out of my garage. I had a gym set up and I was training clients in there. And it was very cool. But then 2019 came and COVID hit and everything changed. And I realized I couldn't really train clients in person anymore. I had to adapt. I had to change. And one of my clients suggested I started posting on TikTok, which I was like, how old was I? I was in my 30s. And I was like, I don't know what TikTok is. I'm too old for this app. What do you mean? However, I took her advice. I started posting on TikTok. I didn't really know what I was doing. A lot of it was trends and typical tutorials and fitness advice. And it took me a while to really find my niche. But eventually, I started realizing that the stuff that people really resonated with and cared about was the anti-diet culture content that I made. Things about body positivity and inclusivity and things about people's relationship with food and their relationship with their body and exercise, which worked out great because I liked talking about that. And to be honest, there's not a lot of people talking about it in the industry, and there's not a lot of men, especially. So that worked out in my favor, but it was something I was really passionate about. And I think you can feel that in my content. And I get wonderful messages from people every single day telling me how my content has made a difference in their life. And that is so, so important to me because everybody deserves to feel their best and to live a happy and healthy life. But for so long, we have been lied to about what that looks like. Diet culture has had an absolute vice grip on our parents, our grandparents, and us, talking about what is healthy and what's not healthy. And immediately when people think of health, they think of, first and foremost, a thin body, right? They think of extreme restriction. They think of nonstop exercise, juice cleanses, diet pills, giving up carbohydrates or fats or whatever. And I just don't believe that is sustainable or realistic for most people. So what I intend to do through my content, through this podcast, through my message in general, is to reject harmful diet culture and unrealistic expectations to create a sustainable and inclusive and accessible space where everybody can celebrate their unique strengths and can understand and listen to their body in a way that makes them feel confident and happy. But the big thing that I want you to take away from this, and the reason that I called this episode Starting Imperfectly, is because it's okay to be nervous and scared about starting something new. And obviously, I can relate this to starting a fitness journey or starting a road towards wellness and repairing your relationship with food and exercise. For many of you, this is going to be the first time that you've done it. Or maybe you've done it before, but you're having to start again. And that is scary. Maybe it's because you're scared of failing. Maybe it's because you're scared of success. And I think that's going to be a topic we're going to approach in a future podcast is, the reasons why we have those feelings. But the important thing that I want you to remember, and the thing I try to remind myself, is that perfection is not the goal. The goal is presence. The goal is progress, even if that's a little bit at a time. That's why the podcast is called Showing Up Anyway, because even when you're struggling, you're trying. And if you're doing your best, you're doing enough. Real change does not start with mastery. It starts with vulnerability. It starts with you taking that first step towards change, just being there. I remember one of my clients texted me and she said, I went to the gym today and I stayed in the parking lot and I cried. And then I went home. But I went and we celebrated that because that was a big step. That's the first step of many. It's not about doing everything right. It's not about making giant changes that immediately make you this perfectly healthy person. That's not real. You're not going to be what you see on social media. That's not who they are. You're going to have times where it's scary. You're going to have times where you cry. You're going to have times where you are angry. You're going to have times where you are frustrated, where you seemingly are doing everything right and nothing is working, where you're doing everything well until one day you make a mistake and then it feels like everything is fallen to pieces. That's being human. And so I'm going to be here to help remind you that you're human. I tell my clients all the time, if you ever achieve perfection, congratulations, you're the first. You don't have to have it all together to begin. This podcast is not going to be perfect. I'm not going to always say the right things. I might mess up a line or lose my train of thought. But the important thing, see, it's already started. The important thing is that I'm showing up. I'm doing it. And whatever your goal is, I think if you show up, you can do it too. I recently became really good friends with a guy you might know. His name is Scotty K Fitness. And he has a phrase that I really love. He says, let's do it afraid. And that's something I reminded myself when starting this podcast and something that I'm going to pass on to you. It's okay to do something you're scared of, you're nervous about. The important thing is that even if you're feeling that way, you show up anyway. I'm not going to dredge on too long. This is our first introduction to each other in this podcast form. Please be patient as I figure out the timeline. But I am super happy that you tuned in and you listened and you let me speak. And I love that so many of you care about what I have to say. Thank you for helping me spread this message and for being so open-minded to learn something new. I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Showing Up Anyway. You can find it for free on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And wherever you're listening, if you like the show, I'd love it if you gave me a 5-star review because that does help other people find the show. And hopefully it'll help change their life just like you're looking to change yours. If you're listening on Spotify, though, you can follow me and tap the bell icon so you get notifications when new episodes come out. I'm Coach Adam. Remember, when things get challenging, keep showing up anyway.